Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia has handed Ukraine a written list of its demands as part of peace talks. Peskov told reporters that Moscow is waiting for a response from Kyiv. Russia's earlier negotiation demands have included Ukraine becoming a neutral country, ceding the Donetsk and Luhansk regions to pro-Russia separatists, and recognizing the 2014 annexation of Crimea. Ukrainian President Zelensky says he has not seen or heard about this document. And this week, Zelensky also said that giving away any territory is out of the question for Ukraine. Now, let's bring in Thomas Graham now. He's a distinguished fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He joins us from New York City. Mr. Graham, it's good to have you on the program with us. Russia says that it handed over its proposals to Ukraine on a path to peace. Obviously, we don't know what's inside, but what can we read into the fact that this path still seems to be open?
Well, I don't think it's a serious path at this point. In the previous negotiations, the demands that Russia was making on the Ukrainians were basically that it capitulate, that it agreed to the independence of the separatist regions, to Russia's annexation of Crimea, and that Ukraine become neutral. Clearly, all these things together aren't acceptable to Ukraine. And I don't think that Moscow is engaged in serious negotiations at this point.
So what do you think they're up to right now?
Well, I think part of this is that they want to put pressure on Ukraine. Obviously, they are launching a new offensive in the east. They hope to take over the full oblast of Donetsk and Luhansk in the near future, something that would allow them to claim something of a minor victory after the humiliating withdrawal from around Kiev earlier in this month. And they want to indicate to the Ukrainians that there's still perhaps a peace plan that's open in an effort to demoralize the Ukrainian population. And all this comes on top of the very heavy bombardment of Ukraine in the past few days, continuing attacks on civilian infrastructure and civilians. So I think this is all part of a plan to try to break the will of the Ukrainian people.
Last weekend, Mr. Peskov said that President Putin is hoping for an end to this entire operation within a matter of days. Now, that got our attention, a matter of days. Is Russia maybe here seeking a way out, a chance to be able to declare victory by May 9th?
Well, I'm sure that President Putin would like to have something positive to say by May 9th. This is a big event in Russia, the victory over Nazi Germany. But it's hard to see what he could accomplish in the next couple of weeks. Ukraine is being supplied very rapidly by Western countries. They have the will to fight. They have proven quite effective in dealing with the Russian military so far. So I think the Russians are facing a tough slog in the east, and I would doubt that Putin will have a major victory to report come May 9th.
You are aware that the West, particularly the U.S. and the U.K., they have delivered more and more heavy weapons to Ukraine. They are committed to that. There's also reporting that the weapons being delivered continue to become even more potent. How worried should we be, or is there a danger of some sort of mission creep taking place here?
Well, I don't think it's so much mission creep on the Western side at this point, but it does create a paradoxical situation, and that is that the worse the Russians do militarily in the East, the greater the temptation on the Russian part to escalate the conflict. So far, the Russians have not targeted with any great vigor the convoys that are ferrying these weapons into Ukraine. As Ukraine receives much more effective weapons that it can use to repulse this latest Russian attack, I think Russia will be tempted to go after that. That does raise the question of where they would attack these convoys, on Ukrainian territory or where at transshipment points that are located in NATO countries. If it's the latter, then that raises the question of Article 5 guarantees and could lead to a much larger conflict.
And just briefly, do you think, though, that the chances are very good that we'll see an attack by Russian forces on those convoys within Ukraine?
I think the risk of that is growing, particularly as the military conflict becomes much more bitter in the east. So I would expect something like this to happen within the next few weeks.
Okay. Mr. Thomas Graham with the Council on Foreign Relations. Mr. Graham, as always, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.